Welcome back to Heroes Behind the Badge. This is part 2 with Randy Sutton, the veteran who survived 5 shootings and founded the Wounded Blue. In part 1, Randy shared his harrowing gun battle and his journey of why, believing he survived for an unfinished mission. Today, we'll discover that mission. Randy's story moves from his career peak to a devastating medical emergency. How his own department abandoned him when he needed them most would lead him to create a lifeline for thousands of forgotten officers. Let's rejoin Randy Sutton, Dennis Collins, Craig Floyd, and Bill Erfurth.
Combat is combat, whether you're a cop, whether you're a soldier, whether you're a Marine. When you are in a life and death situation, it ain't TV. It's the real deal. And your body does things that you don't expect. Your mind does things. You get auditory shutdown. There's all kinds. But you see, we are so focused on the TV and the movie images that the reality can sink a cop, can destroy their career. If this had happened in this day and age, you and I wouldn't be talking right now because I'd be behind bars.
Yeah. You know, I want to jump in here because this is a good point to make for everybody, and we've discussed this and debated this. It's on, you know, we've even put body cam videos on our website about some of these shooting situations where the fallacy that's been propagated by television and movies is that, boom, you shoot somebody one time, it's over, they're done, right?
Right.
People need to know that that's not the case. I mean, I can't tell you, and I'm sure you've had the same thing, people that aren't either in the military or law enforcement, they don't understand that. Well, why did that cop have to shoot him 12 times?
Yeah.
Well, because the guy was still shooting back. I mean, you have to, you have to put your adversary down and whatever it takes. And it took 43 rounds. I'd be interested to know if the guy was high on something or what his state was, because I can tell you, I think I was 21 years old on a scene. A guy had been running around with a samurai sword. He was completely naked. He doused himself with some kind of gasoline or whatever it was, running around on fire. He's running at all the cops. It took 21 rounds to drop that guy. 21 rounds because he wasn't affected by it.
Right.
It turned out he was on PCP. And I'm kind of curious what this guy, in the autopsy, perhaps he was on, and just to dispel that fallacy, because you're not going to drop somebody with one shot unless you hit him in the head or the heart. It's just not happening.
So the autopsy revealed that he was a meth addict, but he was not high on this night. He had done so much meth previously that he went into a meth psychosis and told his girlfriend that he was of Japanese descent, told his girlfriend that God had appeared to him in a dream and appointed him the ultimate ninja warrior. And that's why he dressed up like he did. And he went out to do battle. And, but he was not high, which shocked me as well.
Yeah, talking about the realities versus TV and pop culture's version of law enforcement, we see so many shows where an officer on TV shoots and kills somebody one day. The next morning, they're at the water cooler talking about whatever, the latest sports event with his buddies. This isn't reality. I mean, I have to find out, years ago it wasn't quite the same as today, but what happened to you after the shooting? Were you allowed to come back the next day and act as if nothing ever happened?
Hell no. Even back then we had a process. It was called the coroner's jury. And the coroner's jury reviewed all of the officer involved shootings. But it was presented by our homicide section to the coroners. They convened a jury and they heard all the evidence and they made a determination whether the shooting was justifiable, excusable, or unjustifiable. And so I testified, but it took about 3 months. I was off duty for about 3 months during that time. And the second fatal shooting, which was just before I retired, I was off for an extended period of time.
Which is
said
kind of
something to me
surprising
once.
because, different agencies handle that differently. I
Right.
can say we had an inquest, and the inquest would happen, months down the road, but you weren't relieved of duty the entire time like that. You eventually did go back. You usually were on leave for 3 days after a shooting incident or some kind of traumatic incident, and then you'd come back to work or whatever it may be. If you were injured, you'd be on light duty, but you didn't really have to deal with that. I mean, psychologically, having to sit around and wait for 3 months, knowing that your life is in somebody else's hands,
Yeah.
after you just dealt with one of the most traumatic things that anybody can deal with, seems a little crazy. And I know you have something that you'd like to talk about in regards to that because, most agencies call it administrative leave. And your average citizen or the people that are listening to the news media are like, oh, he's on administrative leave. He must have fucked up. He must have done something wrong.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's not the case. And you're trying to rebrand that, I guess is the best way to say, and to call it critical incident leave. Why don't you talk
Exactly.
about that?
Exactly. So, yeah, it's, you feel like you're adrift a little bit, um, because your fate is in someone else's hands.
Mhm.
And this is in the days before, the anti-law enforcement. I mean, there's always been an anti-law enforcement, group out there, but it wasn't to the point that we see, for a
Today.
few years ago and even today. So that your fate's going to be in the hands of a jury, so to speak. So yeah, it's very disquieting. And when I became involved in the Wounded Blue, I realized how difficult this situation was for a lot of police officers because of the connotation of administrative leave. In fact, I now, when I give presentations to law enforcement leadership, I ask this question. I got nothing but chiefs and, higher ranking people. I said, who here, when you when a guy screws up and they commit misconduct or corruption, who here places them on something called administrative leave? And virtually every hand goes up. I said, okay, how many of this in this room, when an officer gets involved in a shooting, places them on administrative leave? And you can see them all looking at each other, and sheepishly, they all put their hand up. And I said, if you hear nothing from me today, go back and change your policy. What you are doing is you are traumatizing them right now because you are calling it the same thing as when you punish someone. And some people do it, some leaders do it, and others ignore it, as many police leaders do. But it's an important thing. It's an important concept because from the moment you pull that trigger, your life changes. Now, let me say this, okay? My life, there's not a day that goes by at some type of during my day is when I'm not reminded of that night. Was I justified? Of course. Was it him or me? Of course. Why didn't I? But here's the thing. We all know about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I don't even call it that anymore. I call it post-traumatic stress injury because it's fixable just like any other injury. But there's another concept to this that we rarely talk about and should, and that's post-traumatic stress growth. You see, I'm not the same guy that I was before this shooting. I changed, but I fully believe I changed for the better. I believe I became a better cop. I believe I became a better human being. And it changed the trajectory of my life because it gave me what I call the journey of why. And that journey was, why didn't I die that night? I was literally almost touching that gun. How could I not have got hit by one bullet? How could I have walked away from that unscathed. And that reflection changed me as a person because it made me think about, all right, Randy, why didn't you die that night? And I fully believe that it's because I had not completed the mission that I was put here to do. And of course, that begs the next question, right? All right, well, what's that, Randy? And I fully believe I came up with that answer too. And that was, I was put here to change the lives of law enforcement. I was put here to tell that story, to tell the lessons, and to be there for law enforcement officers in their time of need. And I fully believe that I didn't die that night because I hadn't completed that mission. And part of that is the wounded blue. And that's why I didn't die.
And it's an amazing story. I mean, and again, 5 shootings. We talked about one incident of the 5. But for sake of time, I'm going to move forward to the end of your career in law enforcement in Las Vegas. And you had a stroke while on duty with a younger officer. And it was really what happened after that stroke that led you to realize the need for helping injured and disabled officers, that you went through a terrible ordeal with your own department and you wanted to make sure that you provided assistance to other officers facing the same challenges. Tell us about that stroke that night and what happened afterwards that upset you so much and disappointed you in terms of your own department.
So, you could tell I loved being a cop. I mean, I was completely dedicated to it. When I did get promoted, I promoted late because I loved being a sergeant. Sergeant's the best job on the department. And that's where the most action is. That's where you're closest to your people. You can literally, create a legacy by the people that work for you and work with you. So I loved that job, but there came a time when I did promote to lieutenant. And as we talked about a little bit earlier, that's the last rank where you can actually be a cop, and in most departments. So I stayed on the graveyard shift because in Vegas, that's where all the stuff's happening. So I was the graveyard lieutenant. I loved doing it. And one particular night, I was the watch commander. And whenever I was a watch commander, which meant I was the highest ranking officer on duty. And remember, the Metropolitan Police is the 9th largest department in the country. So we have a big agency. Now, whenever I was watch commander, I would take a young police officer with me. That's how I got to know my people, because I got a lot of people working for me, right? I was supervising 100 and some people. In order to get to know them, you get spend a night in a police car with somebody. You're going to get to know exactly what's really going on in your agency. So I had this young cop with me, never ridden with me before. And on this particular night, it's 2:30 in the morning, right in front of Bally's Hotel on Las Vegas Boulevard, the famous Strip. And I was talking to him like I'm talking to you guys. And suddenly I found myself talking slower. And I could literally feel my brain slowing down. And I knew right away I was having a stroke. So I stopped the police car right in the middle of the street. And I said, "Get me medical. I'm having a stroke." And this poor kid's looking at me like, is he messing with me? Is that the way Lieutenant screws with people? And he realized I wasn't. And I got out of the car to go around to the passenger side in case he needed to get me to the hospital. And I started speaking gibberish. And I knew I was speaking gibberish, but I couldn't control myself. And then I lost the ability to speak and move altogether, and I crumpled to the pavement. And I lay there absolutely helpless, fully conscious, fully aware of what was going on, but having no ability to control myself. And I've been through some frightening stuff, as you just heard one of those stories. This was the most frightening moment of my life. I was literally not afraid to die. In fact, I was praying to die because I didn't want to live like that. And tourists are walking by me, taking my picture with their cell phone cameras. And it was the worst experience of my life. Well, once again, that angel that was on my shoulder that night, all those years ago, was with me again. And The clot went through my brain, did some damage, but certainly could have been a lot worse. Now, I should mention that 3 weeks before this happened, my mother died in my arms after a protracted illness. And a few months before that is when I was involved in that last shooting. So there was a lot going on in my brain and in my heart. And when they did all the tests and all, they found out that I had a severe heart condition, which I didn't know about. And when the doctor is, I'm in the hospital and the doctor comes in, he says, Randy, how are you feeling? I say, quite honestly, I'm feeling pretty good. And he says, that's great, Randy, but I don't want you to be under the misconception that anything we did is going to preclude you from walking out of here and maybe having another stroke or a heart attack. So you need to think about your own mortality. And that wasn't what I thought. That wasn't what I had expected to hear. And what happened next was life-changing. And that is that my own department turned its back on me and said, we're not paying your medical bills and we're not giving you your benefits. And I went, wait a minute. What are you talking about? You have to. It's the law. It's a workers' compensation injury statutorily. And they said, yeah, but make us. And I was stunned. That isn't even the right word. I felt abandoned. I felt betrayed. I went to go see the sheriff who I served with for 24 years. And I said, how do you treat me like this? And I'll never forget this moment. He looked me right in the eyes. Randy, this isn't personal. It's just business. And he was telling me the truth. You see, I was no longer of service to this agency, to my city. I was now a financial liability. And over the next year, almost year and a half, I had to fight them in court to get them to pay my medical bills and to give me my benefits. And they spent tens of thousands of dollars of taxpayers' money to fight me. And I couldn't figure out why. Well, I did figure out why. They knew I was going to win, but they knew that the time was on their side. And they were hoping that I would die in the meantime. Now, if you think that that is not a kick in the gut, where you know that your own department wishes you would die, it's devastating. And
so this is where I want to chime in, because there's a lot of this that I've seen as well, I can relate to. And so the question is, and this will be an interesting discussion with the audience, because we walked in those same kind of shoes. I didn't have that same situation going out with, like you did medically or something like that, but I'd seen it. I often found that if you were an ass kisser, if you were in the right rank and position, and you did exactly what you were told like a good little boy, that wouldn't have happened to you. You would have been taken care of. But you were a hard-charging, kick-ass, no bullshit kind of cop. I was like you. I never tested to go past lieutenant because I wanted to be a tactical commander. I wanted to be out there doing it. And that was why I wanted to do it, because it was what being a policeman was all about. But I'll tell you what, when you create havoc, when you have to go in there time after time and explain why somebody or you or whatever fucked somebody up or killed somebody, and you have to say, would you rather be burying the cop or burying the scumbag right now? And, all of a sudden you become a little bit of an adversary to the administration. And I'm guessing that the rank and file thought you were a hero and loved you, but the brass thought you were a pain in the ass.
You can pretty much frame that.
And it's a shame, but I think everybody sees that.
Yeah.
Everybody that's done the job sees that, right? The outside world has no clue.
Right. Right. Well, so but here's the way fate works, right? If you had asked me prior to my having this stroke, what's your future going to be, Randy? Well, I had all kinds of plans. Well, all those plans changed. But so now I don't have a job. I've lost my career. I've lost my mother. I'm adrift, man. I'm adrift. It's a very, very dark place. And right now comes in all the stuff that I did during my career, writing the books, being the most featured officer on the TV show Cops, being in the movies, being a police trainer for decades. Suddenly, because of my visibility in the law enforcement community, cops started reaching out to me. Randy, I know you don't know me, but I saw you in Cops, and I've always admired you. And I was shot in the line of duty, and my department has thrown me away. Randy, I know you don't know me, but I was paralyzed when my police car was hit by a DUI. My department's not paying my medical bills. I feel that they've abandoned me. Not just one, not two, but three, and then six, and then eight. Not because I could do anything, but simply because I was visible in the law enforcement community. Now, I was thinking, I'm not the Lone Ranger. And so I would be having these conversations with these cops, sharing our stories, realizing we're not alone, realizing that we're all in this together. And that peer group helped me immensely. And I realized, you know what? Now this is where Craig and I's history plays a role. So one of my assignments with the police department, I was on the police department's honor guard. I was their assistant commander for like 13 years. So each year I would come out to the National Law Enforcement Memorial, and that's where I met Craig. And I was very familiar with the organization Cops, Concerns of Police Survivors. And so realizing this, I thought, you know what? There's got to be, well, first of all, I thought there had to be a resource for these cops. And in fact, I called Cops and I said, hey, and I knew the director at the time. And I said, I'm getting all these communications by these guys that have been injured in the line of duty. Do you guys help them? And she said, Randy, we don't have the resources for that. We've been looking for somebody that would create it. And that's when I realized what my calling was. And that's how the Wounded Blue was born. And that's why our mission is never forgotten, never alone. And we've helped more than 15,000 police officers in the last 5 years. We're saving lives, we're saving careers, we're saving marriages. And of all the things that I never thought I would be doing in my life, I realized that all those things were put into place in order to create this organization, and this was my legacy.
And one of those services you provide is called Code for Total Wellness. What does that mean? What's Code for, and what total wellness are you trying to create?
Well, so that was when we first began. I was looking for a way to get these officers the opportunity to get counseling where it would be not too expensive for them. So we actually contracted with a company and had, you know, a wellness program where they could actually access psychologists. But it wound up going away because I couldn't get anybody to do it. Maybe, you know, of course, this was 5 years ago. People were less inclined to ask for help. So what we do now is I have a clinical director, and we have amazing resources, and we get people into treatment all the time. I mean, yesterday we got a phone call on our hotline. Within 12 hours, we had that officer in a facility to deal with her alcoholism. And we have amazing. We've partnered with so many great organizations to help, because everybody's journey is different, right? What we do is we provide peer support. My entire team of volunteer cops, everybody's been shot, stabbed, beaten, run over, screwed up, screwed over, and they've been down this path. Many have faced serious PTS, come out on the other side. And so they know what it's like. And when somebody reaches out to us, they know that they're going to get somebody that's walked in similar shoes to them. Everybody's path is unique, but there are so many similarities.
Right.
And to know that you're not alone, that you're not forgotten, that people care, is sometimes that's all they need to keep that gun out of their mouth.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. And you mentioned this is your legacy. What an awesome legacy to have, that you've done that, you've walked the walk, you've talked the talk, and now you are instrumental in taking care of the people that you worked with, that do this job, that our law enforcement. Our law enforcement is the fabric of America, quite frankly, and it's interesting to know. I mean, it's one of the top professions for divorce, suicide, alcoholism. People don't realize that. It is a lot of stress and injuries, death. Going to work as a cop is about, and especially in a big city, right? You work in a big city, like you said, you were in a smaller town, you were doing the wave to everybody going by, but you work in a big city like we did. Every day is about death, destruction, and despair. No one's calling 911 to celebrate the birthday. They're calling 911 because they, shot and killed each other over the last chicken wing on the table. So it's a good thing you're doing, a honorable, heroic thing you're doing.
Well, you know what? When I reflect now, because I've had, besides that stroke, I've had two others in the in not too distant past, and then underwent life-changing surgery to save my life. And so I understand mortality in a very personal way. And so I reflect on my life, and I reflect on what it meant. And so I'm proud.
Absolutely. Definitely should
We're
be
proud and honored to know you, Randy. I've known you for many years. I know you've impressed Dennis and Bill in just this short time. But tell people listening to this, many of them law enforcement professionals and family members, how they can get help if they need it from the Wounded Blue, and maybe how they can support the Wounded Blue. Because I know, like all nonprofits, you rely on contributions from individuals and from corporations and foundations. So where can people go if they need help or if they want to support it?
My website is thewoundedblue.org. That's thewoundedblue.org. People can reach out for help there. If you're in law enforcement and you want to know who we are, please go to thewoundedblue.org. Check us out. We also, by the way, we have a documentary film on Amazon called The Wounded Blue. And if you watch it, bring your tissues because you're going to need them. But it shows in the stark reality what many of these officers face when they become injured. Now, to contact us, you can either connect with us through the website, or we have a hotline, 833-TWB-TALK. That's 833-TWB-TALK, and someone will always answer that phone. And you're 100% right when it comes down to making the wheels go in a nonprofit. And by the way, I take no salary. I live on my pension. We're completely at the mercy of donations, and it's been difficult. It's been difficult to raise significant enough money to, my only parameters are what I have the resources to do. So, and we've done amazing things, but we need your support. So if you want to give $20 a month, please go to the website, hit that donate button, and give what you can. And if you are a corporate entity and you want to become a sponsor of the Wounded Blue or a sponsor of our annual conference, which is called, it's coming up in September. It's called the National Law Enforcement Survival Summit. And this is our 5th annual. And this is life-changing stuff. It is every aspect of surviving a law enforcement career, physically, emotionally, psychologically, relationships. And it is so powerful. We've had cops stand up at this conference and say, if it weren't for this conference, I was going to kill myself. We literally have had that happen more than once. I recommend if a cop has one training experience that they can go to a year, make it this one. It's in September, the 22nd through the 25th. It is life-changing. It is life-affirming. And we design it not only for the officer, active duty, but retired cops as well, because we all know you can hang up your gun and badge. It doesn't mean all the bad shit you saw is going away.
True.
And it's we have some of the best speakers in the country coming. It's amazing. So the woundedblue.org, the National Law Enforcement Survival Summit, we're looking for corporate sponsorship for that. And so call me directly or get hold of me, Randy at thewoundedblue.org. That's Randy at thewoundedblue.org. And I am available 24/7.
Randy.
Dennis, I think that's a great way to end it.
Sure.
We call this show Heroes Behind the Badge, and I think we found another one. I think Randy Sutton may be near the top of the list when it comes to Heroes Behind the Badge. He was a great cop. He's been a good friend of mine, and he's doing amazing work with the Wounded Blue. So please help him out. If you need help and you're a cop, go to thewoundedblue.org and get that help. Dennis, back to you, my friend.
Okay, Craig. Randy, thank you. Thanks for taking the time to tell your story. Thanks for your decades of service. I mean, we can never thank you enough for that, for putting yourself on the line. And thank you for sharing the intimate details of how you have found your purpose. You know, you said it very clearly a few minutes ago. I never expected to find myself doing this at this point in my life, but I was saved. I am alive for a reason, and you found your why, and your why has helped a ton of people. And on this program just today, and on all the podcasts that you do on your own podcast, you are helping people just by representing your why, the reason, the mission that you're still here. Thank God you're still here, my friend. What a great journey. And thanks for sharing it with our listeners. And a particular thanks for giving all your contact information as a 401, as a 501c4 advocacy group, Citizens Behind the Badge. We need that too. And we don't want to compete with Randy, but we serve a whole different purpose. As you know, we're an advocacy organization. And this podcast that you've just listened to with Randy Sutton, the amazing stories of Randy Sutton, this podcast is brought to you by Citizens Behind the Badge, the leading voice for the ladies and gentlemen of law enforcement in the American nation. We are at citizensbehindthebadge.org, citizensbehindthebadge.org. That's where you can reach us. You can hit the donate button, bing, and that will take you to a place where you can donate to help us advocate for the men and women of law enforcement. And again, don't forget to hit subscribe, like, follow, all three. That will help us immensely in spreading this word. If you liked anything Randy had to say today, okay, hit like, follow, or subscribe. We would appreciate it, okay? So until the next time,